The most dangerous mistake a person can make is believing a badge makes them untouchable. The afternoon sun reflected off rows of parked cars outside the Lakeside Commons shopping center just outside Atlanta, where families carried shopping bags, teenagers laughed over iced coffee, and parents hurried children across the wide crosswalks. It looked like any ordinary Thursday, the kind of day that faded into memory before dinner, until a single radio call transformed an ordinary parking lot into the beginning of a story no one standing there would ever forget. Officer Ryan Walker guided his patrol SUV between the rows of vehicles, his eyes scanning every movement with the confidence of someone who had long stopped questioning his own instincts. The dispatch report had been brief. Suspicious woman. Possible impersonation. Possible federal credentials. Ryan barely listened beyond the first sentence. In his mind, the conclusion had already been written. A few hundred feet away, Danielle Brooks walked calmly toward a dark gray sedan, carrying nothing more than a leather folder and a small shoulder bag. She wore a navy blazer over a simple blouse, comfortable slacks, and practical shoes that blended easily into the afternoon crowd. Nothing about her appearance invited attention. She moved with quiet confidence, acknowledging no one, never rushing, never hesitating. She seemed like another professional ending a routine day. Yet Ryan saw something entirely different. He stepped out of the cruiser, one hand raised as he called across the lot. "Ma'am, stop right there." Conversations nearby slowed. A father loading groceries paused. Two college students lowered their phones. A delivery driver remained beside his van, watching with cautious curiosity. Danielle stopped exactly where she was and slowly turned toward the officer. Her expression never changed. Calm. Patient. Almost impossibly composed. Ryan approached with quick, deliberate steps, his voice growing sharper with every word. "Hands where I can see them." Danielle complied immediately, lifting her empty hands into plain view. "Officer," she said evenly, "I'm happy to cooperate." Her tone carried neither fear nor anger, only quiet professionalism. Somehow, that seemed to irritate Ryan even more. "Identification," he demanded. Danielle reached carefully into the inside pocket of her blazer after announcing every movement before making it. She removed a slim black credential wallet and held it where he could see it without taking another step forward. Ryan glanced at the gold seal inside. Then he laughed. Not a nervous laugh. Not a confused laugh. A dismissive laugh loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "An FBI badge," he said with a grin. "That's the best fake I've seen all year." A few uncomfortable chuckles drifted through the growing crowd, though most faces remained silent, uncertain, sensing that something about the moment felt deeply wrong. Danielle did not react. She simply looked at him with steady eyes, as though she had already seen this scene unfold countless times before. "Officer Walker," she said quietly after reading his nameplate, "I recommend you contact your supervisor before making another decision." Ryan shook his head with visible amusement. "You don't get to tell me how to do my job." Somewhere in the distance, almost lost beneath the afternoon traffic, the faint sound of approaching engines began to echo through the shopping center. No one paid attention to it yet. Not the shoppers. Not the witnesses. And certainly not Ryan Walker, who believed the next 2 minutes belonged entirely to him. Ryan Walker folded his arms and looked around as though the growing audience confirmed that he was in complete control of the situation. The late afternoon air had become strangely quiet. Shopping carts stopped rolling. Store employees stood just inside the automatic doors pretending to organize displays while secretly watching through the glass. A mother gently pulled her young son a few steps closer, whispering that they should stay back. Nearly every phone pointed toward the scene now, tiny camera lenses capturing every word and every expression. Danielle Brooks remained exactly where she had been standing. She did not glance at the crowd or acknowledge the whispers spreading across the parking lot. Her attention stayed on the officer in front of her. Years of federal training had taught her that panic could spread faster than truth, and that composure often revealed more than confrontation ever could. Ryan took another look at the credential wallet in her hand before letting out another dismissive laugh. "You expect me to believe this?" he asked loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Anybody can buy something that looks official on the internet." Danielle slowly closed the credential wallet and lowered it to her side without making any sudden movement. "The credential is authentic," she replied in the same calm voice. "You have every opportunity to verify it through the proper channels." Ryan shook his head. "The proper channel is me." His confidence seemed to grow with every passing second. To him, the crowd was not witnessing uncertainty. They were watching authority. At least that was what he believed. Danielle studied his face for a brief moment, almost as though she were memorizing it rather than judging it. "Officer Walker," she said quietly, "this situation can still end professionally." Her words carried no threat. They sounded more like advice from someone who had already seen the ending. Ryan interpreted them differently. "You are in no position to give advice." A delivery driver standing nearby exchanged an uneasy glance with another witness. Neither spoke. Something about Danielle's steady voice made the entire encounter feel different from an ordinary police stop. There was no shouting. No frantic explanation. No attempt to argue. Only patience. Ryan reached for his shoulder radio. "Dispatch, I have a possible impersonation case. Stand by while I confirm identity." The response came almost immediately, but heavy static swallowed most of the transmission. Ryan frowned and adjusted the volume. Before he could repeat himself, another burst of radio traffic interrupted the channel, followed by several coded messages that sounded unusually urgent. Danielle recognized the codes immediately. Her expression did not change, but deep inside she knew exactly what they meant. Somewhere beyond the shopping center entrance, several black sport utility vehicles had already turned off the main highway. They were closing the distance with deliberate precision. Ryan remained completely unaware. He slipped the radio back onto his shoulder and looked directly at Danielle with a smile that carried more confidence than caution. "Looks like your story is falling apart." Danielle looked past him for only a fraction of a second, noticing a faint reflection moving across the storefront windows. The convoy was almost there. She returned her attention to Ryan and spoke with remarkable calm. "No, officer. It is only beginning." The first black sport utility vehicle rolled silently into the parking lot, followed by another, then a third, each one moving with deliberate precision instead of urgency. Most people assumed they belonged to another police unit responding to Officer Ryan Walker's request. Several witnesses stepped farther aside, expecting the situation to end exactly as Ryan had predicted. He noticed the vehicles only after hearing tires settle onto the asphalt behind him. A confident smile spread across his face. "Perfect timing," he said, glancing briefly over his shoulder before looking back at Danielle Brooks. "Now everyone gets to see this little act come to an end." Danielle remained composed. Her breathing never changed. Her shoulders stayed relaxed. She simply watched the convoy come to a smooth stop a short distance away. The doors remained closed for a brief moment that felt much longer than it actually was. The parking lot grew so quiet that the fluttering of an American flag above the shopping center entrance seemed unusually loud. Ryan folded his arms with quiet satisfaction. "When they verify that fake credential," he said, "you are going to have a lot of explaining to do." Danielle answered with the same calm voice that had carried through every minute of the encounter. "Verification is exactly what I requested." The statement puzzled several people standing nearby. If she were pretending, why would she repeatedly ask for verification instead of avoiding it? A retired school principal watching from beside her sedan quietly murmured to her husband, "She has not changed her story once." He nodded without taking his eyes off the scene. "Neither has her expression." Ryan ignored the growing uncertainty around him. Confidence had become its own evidence. He believed experience alone was enough to confirm every assumption he had made. The nearest sport utility vehicle finally opened its driver's side door. A man wearing a dark suit stepped onto the pavement with measured confidence. He was followed by several other professionally dressed men and women whose movements were calm, coordinated, and unmistakably disciplined. None of them rushed. None of them raised their voices. Their presence alone quietly changed the atmosphere. Several shoppers instinctively lowered their conversations. Ryan watched them approach with mild curiosity rather than concern. "About time," he muttered. "Maybe somebody here actually knows how to spot a fake." Danielle said nothing. She recognized every face immediately. Leading the group was Special Agent Marcus Reed, the supervisory special agent overseeing the joint federal review that had brought Danielle into the county several weeks earlier. He walked with steady purpose, carrying no visible urgency because urgency was unnecessary when facts were already established. As Marcus drew closer, his eyes met Danielle's first. She gave an almost imperceptible nod, the kind exchanged between professionals who required no explanation. Ryan noticed the silent acknowledgement but misunderstood it completely. "Do you know these people?" he asked with open disbelief. Danielle answered honestly. "Yes." Ryan let out another short laugh. "That is convenient." Marcus stopped several feet away and calmly surveyed the scene before speaking. His voice was clear, measured, and confident enough to command attention without ever becoming loud. "Good afternoon," he said. "I am looking for Special Agent Danielle Brooks." Danielle raised one hand slightly. "I am here." In a single instant, dozens of witnesses shifted their attention away from Ryan Walker and toward the woman who had remained calm from the very beginning, and for the first time since the encounter began, uncertainty quietly replaced confidence on the officer's face. For a brief second, no one moved. The afternoon seemed to hold its breath. As every eye followed Special Agent Marcus Reed. Ryan Walker looked from Marcus to Danielle and back again, searching for the joke he was certain had to be hiding somewhere in front of him. "You are looking for her?" he asked, forcing a laugh that sounded far less certain than before. Marcus met Ryan's eyes without changing his expression. "Yes," he answered calmly. "Special Agent Danielle Brooks is assigned to a joint federal review operating within this region." The word settled over the parking lot with remarkable weight. The crowd that had whispered only moments earlier became completely silent. Danielle slowly opened the credential wallet once again and held it where Marcus could clearly see it. He gave it only the briefest glance before nodding. "Thank you, Agent Brooks." There was no inspection. No hesitation. No request for additional proof. The simple acknowledgement carried more authority than any argument ever could. Ryan blinked several times as though trying to force the moment to make sense. "Hold on," he said. "I was investigating a possible impersonation." Marcus remained composed. "Investigating is appropriate. Verification is required." Those standing nearby exchanged quiet looks. The difference between the two statements was impossible to ignore. Danielle had requested verification from the beginning. Ryan had repeatedly dismissed it. Marcus turned slightly toward Danielle. "Are you all right?" She answered with the same calm professionalism she had shown throughout the encounter. "Yes." I remained fully cooperative. Several witnesses immediately nodded in agreement. One delivery driver quietly spoke up from behind the gathering. She never argued. She kept telling him to verify her identification. Another witness added, she followed every instruction that was given. Ryan heard every word. Confidence slowly gave way to uncertainty as he realized the crowd had witnessed the entire exchange from the beginning. His own body camera remained active. Store security cameras overlooked the parking lot from multiple angles. Nearly every person standing nearby had recorded at least part of the interaction on a mobile phone. Nothing existed only in memory anymore. Facts had become permanent. Marcus looked toward Ryan with the same professional courtesy he had shown everyone else. "Officer Walker, may I ask whether your dispatcher completed a federal credential verification?" Ryan hesitated. The radio traffic became interrupted. "Did you attempt a secondary verification?" Marcus continued. Ryan did not answer immediately. The silence itself became an answer. Danielle watched quietly, offering no satisfaction and no criticism. She understood that accountability carried far greater weight when people reached the truth on their own. A marked patrol vehicle entered the parking lot from the opposite direction. Captain Michael Torres stepped out and quickly assessed the scene. The moment he recognized Danielle Brooks standing beside Marcus Reed, his expression changed noticeably. He approached with measured steps before extending his hand toward Danielle. "Special Agent Brooks," he said respectfully, "I apologize for the delay." Ryan stared at his captain in complete disbelief. The woman he had dismissed only minutes earlier was now being greeted with unmistakable professional respect by both local leadership and the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Around the parking lot, people slowly lowered their phones, not because the story was ending, but because they had just realized they had witnessed the moment when assumptions gave way to truth, and the next decisions would determine far more than anyone had expected when the afternoon first began. Captain Michael Torres took a slow breath before speaking again, carefully choosing every word. "Special Agent Brooks has been working with a joint federal task force for several weeks," he said, making sure both Ryan Walker and the growing crowd could hear him. "Her assignment has been coordinated through the appropriate channels." Ryan stared at his captain in disbelief. "Nobody told me." Captain Torres answered without emotion. "Only personnel with a verified operational need were informed. That was intentional." The explanation landed harder than any raised voice could have. Ryan suddenly realized this was not an unexpected interruption to someone else's work. He had stepped directly into an active federal operation without recognizing it. Danielle remained composed, neither celebrating nor criticizing anyone involved. She simply closed her credential wallet and held it at her side. Marcus Reed glanced toward the surrounding witnesses, many of whom were still recording quietly from a respectful distance. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said in a calm, professional tone, "thank you for remaining cooperative. We appreciate your patience." His words immediately lowered the tension. People who had been uncertain only moments before now understood that the situation was moving through established legal procedures rather than confrontation. Ryan looked at Danielle again, searching for some sign that she had planned the encounter itself. "Was this a test?" he asked. Danielle answered honestly. "No. I came here to complete a scheduled meeting. What happened after your arrival was entirely your decision." Those words lingered in the afternoon air. They carried no accusation, only a simple statement of fact. Ryan replayed the last several minutes in his mind. Every opportunity had been there. Every invitation to verify her identity had been offered calmly. Every decision that followed had been his alone. Marcus spoke again, this time directing his attention toward Captain Torres. "We will need to preserve all available documentation from this encounter, including dispatch communications, body camera recordings, and any official reports generated today." Captain Torres nodded immediately. "That process has already begun." Ryan instinctively glanced toward the camera mounted on his uniform. For the first time since stepping out of his patrol vehicle, he seemed fully aware that every word, every instruction, and every choice had been recorded from beginning to end. There would be no disagreement over what had been said. There would be no uncertainty about the sequence of events. Facts would speak for themselves. Danielle noticed the realization settling across Ryan's face. Her expression remained compassionate rather than triumphant. Years of public service had taught her that accountability was never about humiliation. It was about protecting public trust. A young boy standing beside his mother tugged gently on her sleeve and whispered, "Mom, is everything okay now?" She smiled softly before answering, "I think the people in charge are making sure the truth comes first." Danielle overheard the quiet exchange and allowed herself the faintest smile. That single sentence captured the purpose behind every long day, every difficult assignment, and every careful decision she had made throughout her career. Marcus checked his watch before turning back toward Danielle. "Agent Brooks, once we finish here, the review team is prepared to continue according to schedule." She nodded. Understood. The mission itself had never changed. Only the afternoon had taken an unexpected turn. As the gentle breeze swept across the parking lot once more, the atmosphere felt completely different from only a few minutes earlier. Authority had not disappeared. It had simply returned to where it belonged, grounded not in assumptions or appearances, but in patience, professionalism, and the willingness to let verified truth lead every decision. SUA Ryan Walker remained motionless as the weight of the afternoon settled around him. Only minutes earlier, every decision had seemed simple, every conclusion obvious. Now each confident assumption stood beside a verified fact, and the difference between the two had never felt greater. The parking lot gradually returned to life. Shoppers quietly continued toward their cars, but many still glanced back over their shoulders, knowing they had witnessed something that would remain with them long after the day ended. Captain Michael Torres stepped beside Ryan without raising his voice. "Officer Walker," he said calmly, "I need your body camera recording secured according to department policy. Do not alter anything. Do not discuss the incident with witnesses. We will follow standard procedure." Ryan nodded automatically. For the first time since arriving, he answered without argument. "Yes, Captain." Marcus Reed observed the exchange with quiet professionalism. "That is the correct process," he said. "The purpose of documentation is not to support assumptions. It exists to preserve facts." Danielle Brooks listened without interruption. She understood that accountability depended on consistency. Rules mattered most when they applied equally to everyone, regardless of title, appearance, or agency. One of the younger federal agents approached Marcus and quietly handed him a tablet containing preliminary dispatch records. Marcus reviewed the information for several seconds before looking toward Captain Torres. Dispatch logs confirmed that Agent Brooks requested voluntary verification from the beginning of the encounter. Captain Torres slowly closed his eyes for a brief moment before exhaling. "That matches what witnesses reported." Ryan lowered his gaze. He remembered every opportunity Danielle had given him to pause, verify, and reassess. None of those moments had required extraordinary judgment. They had required patience. Standing only a few feet away, Danielle finally spoke directly to him again. Her voice remained steady, free of anger or satisfaction. "Officer Walker, every professional makes decisions under pressure. What defines public service is the willingness to slow down before certainty replaces evidence." Ryan looked at her, surprised by the absence of resentment in her words. "Why are you telling me that?" Danielle answered honestly. "Because if this becomes only about one difficult afternoon, then nothing improves. The lesson matters more than the embarrassment." Several witnesses who had remained nearby quietly exchanged thoughtful glances. The story unfolding before them no longer resembled the confrontation they had expected. Instead of arguments, they heard professionalism. Instead of revenge, they saw restraint. A local reporter arrived near the edge of the parking lot after hearing emergency radio traffic but stopped short when a department spokesperson politely explained that no public statement would be made until all documentation had been reviewed. Even that decision reflected the same principle Danielle had repeated from the beginning. Verify first. Speak second. Marcus C. The federal vehicles remained parked quietly near the entrance as uniformed officers and federal agents continued their work with calm precision. There were no raised voices, no dramatic confrontations, only a careful commitment to procedure. Captain Michael Torres spoke briefly with members of his command staff before returning to Ryan Walker. His expression reflected disappointment rather than anger. "Officer Walker," he said, effective immediately, "you are being relieved from field duty pending an administrative review. Department policy requires that your service equipment be processed according to standard procedure while the investigation is conducted. Ryan listened without interrupting. Just an hour earlier, he would have argued every point. Now he simply nodded. I understand. He carefully followed each instruction exactly as it was given. Several officers documented the transfer of department equipment, while another supervisor recorded the necessary reports. Every action was methodical, transparent, and witnessed. The same accountability expected from every citizen was now being applied inside the profession itself. Danielle Brooks watched from a respectful distance beside Marcus Reed. She did not approach. She did not celebrate. Her assignment had never been about proving someone wrong. It had always been about protecting the integrity of public service. Marcus noticed the thoughtful expression on her face. You are quieter than usual, he said. Danielle answered after a brief pause. Moments like this are never victories. They are reminders of why standards exist. Marcus nodded in agreement. Public trust is built one decision at a time. Nearby, several witnesses slowly prepared to leave. Before climbing into his delivery van, the driver who had watched nearly the entire encounter turned toward a young college student who had been recording on her phone. I thought this was going to end very differently, he admitted. She lowered her phone and replied, so did I. I learned that staying calm can be more powerful than arguing. A few parking spaces away, the mother and her young son were loading groceries into their sport utility vehicle. The boy looked toward Danielle and quietly asked, is she a hero? His mother smiled gently before answering, she did what heroes often do. She stayed calm, followed the rules, and trusted the truth. Danielle never heard those words, but they reflected exactly what had unfolded throughout the afternoon. Captain Torres walked over to Marcus and Danielle one final time. Our Internal Affairs Division has already been notified, he said. The body camera footage, dispatch recordings, security video, and witness statements will all be preserved. Marcus extended his hand. Thank you, Captain. Transparency protects everyone. They shook hands with mutual respect, demonstrating that cooperation between agencies depended on professionalism rather than pride. Ryan remained near his patrol vehicle for one last moment before another supervisor escorted him toward an administrative vehicle that would transport him back to headquarters. No one rushed him. No one mocked him. The process itself carried enough weight. As he walked across the parking lot, Ryan glanced once more toward Danielle. She met his eyes briefly and offered a simple nod, acknowledging him not as an enemy but as another public servant facing the consequences of his own decisions. Ryan quietly returned the gesture before looking away. The lesson had become impossible to ignore. Authority could open a conversation, but only integrity could earn lasting respect. As the afternoon sun settled lower across the Georgia sky, the parking lot slowly returned to normal, leaving behind a truth that every witness would remember long after the last official report had been completed. The parking lot was almost empty by the time the final reports were completed. Store employees returned to their routines, families drove home, and the afternoon slowly faded into evening as though the day wanted to erase what had happened. Yet some moments refused to disappear. They stayed with the people who witnessed them because they revealed something greater than a single misunderstanding. Danielle Brooks stood beside the federal vehicle for one last conversation with Marcus Reed before preparing to leave. The review will continue tomorrow, Marcus said. There is still work ahead. Danielle nodded. There always is. She looked once across the shopping center where everything had begun only a short time earlier. The same sidewalks, the same storefronts, the same parking spaces now looked completely ordinary again. It was difficult to believe that one series of decisions had changed the direction of so many lives in less than an hour. Captain Michael Torres approached before the federal convoy departed. Special Agent Brooks, he said sincerely, on behalf of this department, thank you for the professionalism you demonstrated today. Your patience prevented this situation from becoming something far worse. Danielle offered a respectful smile. Professionalism belongs to everyone who wears a badge. We all protect public confidence together. The captain nodded thoughtfully. Those words stayed with him because they reminded him that leadership was not measured by authority alone. It was measured by the willingness to protect standards even when doing so was uncomfortable. Across town, Ryan Walker sat quietly inside an administrative office completing the first steps of the review process. For the first time in many years, he read departmental policy slowly instead of relying on memory. Every sentence about verification, impartiality, and professional judgment carried new meaning. The procedures had always existed. What changed was his understanding of why they mattered. Weeks later, the internal review concluded exactly as the documented evidence required. Every recording, every witness statement, and every official report was examined according to established policy. Recommendations were issued, additional training was implemented, and supervisory procedures were strengthened to reduce the likelihood of similar mistakes in the future. The outcome was not about punishing one individual. It was about reinforcing the principle that public trust depends upon accountability at every level. Danielle continued serving with the same quiet dedication that had defined her long before that afternoon. She never sought recognition for the encounter because she believed the story had never been about her. It had always been about preserving the idea that justice begins with listening, verification, and respect for every person. Months later, one of the young college students who had recorded part of the encounter spoke during a community meeting about what she had witnessed. The most unforgettable part was not when everyone discovered who she was, she said. The unforgettable part was that she never stopped acting with dignity before anyone knew. Those words spread throughout the room because they captured the real lesson. Titles can command attention. Uniforms can represent responsibility. Badges can symbolize authority. But character is revealed only when no one believes you have power. Danielle never needed to raise her voice to prove who she was. She allowed truth to speak in its own time. And in the end, everyone learned the same lasting lesson. Real justice does not arrive through pride, fear, or assumptions. It arrives through patience, integrity, and the courage to let facts lead where certainty never should. Because a badge may represent the law, but character is what gives the law its honor.